This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to CNN. I'm Victor Blackwell in Atlanta. The breaking news this morning, President Trump says the U.S. carried out large-scale strikes on Venezuela overnight. He says its president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, Celia Flores, have been captured and flown out of the country. Attorney General Pam Bondi says both of them have been indicted and in a social media post says that they will, quote, soon face the full wrath of American justice. The Venezuelan vice president says that she has no idea where Maduro and the First Lady are.
Faced with this brutal situation and this brutal attack, we do not know the whereabouts of President Nicolas Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores. We demand immediate proof of life from the government of President Donald Trump, proof of life for President Maduro and the First Lady.
President Trump says that he'll address the nation on the strikes from Mar-a-Lago later this morning. Right now, it's quiet in the capital of Caracas just hours after the strikes, but earlier explosions rocked Venezuela, knocked out power, and sent people running outside. And this strike was at La Carlota Air Base in Caracas. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh joins me now from London. Nick, we just heard from Issa Suarez speaking with some of her sources in country about the fear of what could come next because so many questions are unanswered.
Yeah, I mean, let's go through what we know has happened so far. Since about 1 a.m. local time and these series of explosions rocked Caracas and other parts of Venezuela, multiple helicopters seen in the air and then clearly a U.S. Special Forces operation that removed Nicolas Maduro and his wife from what should have been their heavily fortified and secured premises in the capital there. Hard to understate quite what a move this is geopolitically by the Trump White House to remove the sitting president of a country which it considers to be a regional irritant. Startling, successful, certainly, daring, certainly as well, and also efficient, frankly, given what it seems the brevity, comparatively, of this operation and the impact that it is having. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, hinting that the indictments in the Southern District of New York Court will be the ones that Maduro faced. He had a $50 million bounty on his head, seeking information that could lead towards his capture, and it may well be that the delay we're seeing since Trump's tweet in the early hours of this morning, his 74-word social media post that removed the extraordinary mystery, frankly, or the unresponsibility of exactly what was happening in the skies of Caracas, very quickly to explain that, as many suspected, it was the US military behind this. It now appears that potentially the delay may be about transferring Maduro inside American soil for when President Trump addresses the nation about this move, extraordinary as it is. But I think once perhaps for Trump allies, the exhilaration of removing Maduro, who has been an authoritarian dictator behind violence against protesters and opponents for 13 years. Once that fades, the hard questions now must be answered about what to do with Venezuela's crippled economy. That has been the reason why Maduro has needed to be authoritarian, the mismanagement of basic things like inflation foodstuffs that permeates that entire country. What happens now to Venezuela's military, heavily hit during this brief series of strikes? Should point out the explosions we've been seeing in these videos, utterly alien to life in sleepy, peaceful Caracas, will have terrified the millions who live there. What is the likely course for Venezuela's political elite? Is indeed Delcy Rodriguez the successor? Does she immediately seek a détente with the United States to prevent a similar abduction in the middle of the night occurring to her? These are all urgent questions, and I think the key thing here is for the United States to have planned for the aftermath of Maduro with the same efficiency, detail and resolve as they clearly planned his capture and abduction. The US military, very good at this sort of thing, be it bin Laden in Pakistan, Zawahiri, the Al-Qaeda leader in Afghanistan, Maduro, a man with lesser charges against him in Venezuela, but they fail repeatedly in what comes next. And I'm sure many in Venezuela will be deeply hoping that they now see some sort of future ahead of them where their economic and political problems become part of the United States focus and they're not just left to see further collapse. A reminder, the United States, particularly the Trump administration, want to see many of the hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans on US soil go home and perhaps a calm and prosperous Venezuela would permit that to happen at a faster pace. But we are today in unprecedented territory. In Moscow and Beijing, they will be looking at how their ally, Maduro, is suddenly whisked away from a place where he should have felt security of diplomacy, of the international world order. He may now soon be in a New York courthouse to face drug charges.
Yeah, Russia, as I said a moment ago, is now asking for immediate clarification on the U.S. claims that it has captured Maduro.
They'll probably get that.
Yeah. Nick Payton-Walsh, thanks so much. Joining us now is CNN senior White House reporter Kevin Liptak. Kevin, again, we're going to hear from the president at 11 a.m. Eastern, 3 hours from now. But I understand you have some new information about how this unfolded. What do you know?
Yeah, and what we understand is that the president gave the green light for this operation several days ago. That's according to people familiar with the matter. It was carried out by the elite Delta Force in the U.S. Army. That's the same group that captured Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi some years ago. So a highly trained a force that went in to capture Maduro. They were tracking his location with the assistance of the CIA. And we know that the president had authorized the CIA to operate covertly inside of Venezuela, some weeks ago. We saw some of what they were doing just this week when we learned about that strike on a dock facility that the president said was transporting drugs. But now we're getting a fuller picture of what precisely that agency was doing there. Now, the goal here is to try Maduro on U.S. soil. We've been hearing that from officials. We just heard it explicitly from the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who is citing that indictment in the Southern District of New York that was filed back in 2020. There was this bounty on Maduro, and what Bondi says is that both Maduro and his wife will soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil in American courts. But to be sure, there are plenty of questions here being raised by members of Congress. It does not appear as if the Trump administration briefed, the relevant lawmakers or the relevant committees before taking that action. And this morning, it appears that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has been on the phone talking to senators to discuss some of what happened. And some of them are revealing a little bit about their discussion. Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, said that the strikes that occurred in Venezuela were intended to protect the U.S. personnel who were capturing Maduro, that the president was relying on his Article 2 authority, essentially his authority as commander-in-chief to conduct foreign policy, to carry out these strikes. And I think most critically, what Rubio told Lee was that he anticipates no further action in Venezuela now that Maduro is in U.S. custody. So this appears to be it for now, what we've seen overnight. This is really the culmination of this months-long pressure campaign. There was, I think, some misgivings on the part of the president some months ago about where all of this was leading. We heard that from officials, that he had some reservations that this could potentially all backfire if Maduro was ousted from power, some questions about whether this would be effective, but clearly he has put those to the side and given the green light to go ahead. I think President Trump is also of the era who will remember a mixed history of U.S. interventions in Latin America, including with the CIA. Today is 35 years exactly since the U.S. arrested the Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega at the Vatican Embassy in Panama. So, there is a long, somewhat mixed history for the president to look back on here, but clearly eager to proclaim success in this particular mission, and I think eager to show that justice will be served for what they claim is a drug trafficking charge. The objectives in all of this have always, in a way, led to regime change. That was what the president's ultimate goal was here. We heard that explicitly from Susie Wiles in that Vanity Fair interview. But you also saw a number of different sort of rationales that the president has laid out, whether it was curbing the flow of drugs, whether it was curbing the flow of migrants. You also hear the president talk quite a bit about the oil. Of course, Venezuela is sitting on the world's largest proven oil reserves. And so I think when we hear from the president over at Mar-a-Lago down here in Palm Beach at 11 a.m., it's likely that we're going to hear sort of a combination of all of that. And certainly, I think the question of what happens next in Venezuela, what the president has been planning on that front, whether the U.S. sort of has any role or anticipates any role in stabilizing that country now that the leader has left, those will be critical questions that the president, I think, will need to answer for when we see him in a few hours from now.
And Democrats in the Senate are already asking those questions, as we're seeing on social media. Kevin Liptak, thanks so much.